We've all been told that the Odyssey is a myth. A story about cyclopses, witches, and sea monsters and gods. But myths do have a strange habit. Sometimes, buried beneath centuries of exaggeration is a real event, and there's a line buried in Book 20 of the Odyssey that really shouldn't exist. A prophet stands in a hall full of doomed men, and he says the sun has perished out of heaven, and an evil mist hovers over all. For 2,000 years, everyone reads that as poetry. A metaphor, doomspeak, that kind of thing. Then, two scientists ran the astronomy backwards, and they found a total solar eclipse over the exact islands where the story takes place, on a date that fits the poem's internal timeline almost perfectly. Which raises a question nobody's comfortable answering: how much of the Odyssey actually happened? By the end of this video, we're going to look at a burned city, a palace that might belong to Odysseus himself, and that eclipse. And then you can decide where the myth ends and the memory begins. Here's where we have to start. Because for most modern history, the smartest people alive agreed on one thing: that Troy was fiction. The Trojan War was just a fairy tale, and Homer was Greece's version of a campfire story. And looking for Troy on a map made about as much sense as looking for Narnia. Then, in the 1870s, a German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann, a man with more money than credentials and more obsession than either, took the Iliad literally. He treated the poem like a treasure map, and he went to a mound in northwest Turkey called Hisarlik, near the entrance of the Dardanelles Strait, and he started digging. Then, he found a city. Actually, let me be more clear, he found 9 cities, stacked on top of each other like a geological layer. 3,000 years of people building, burning, and rebuilding on the same hill. Now, Schliemann was, let's just be honest, a bit of a maniac. He dynamited his way through layers modern archaeologists would love to study, would kill to study. He probably smuggled artifacts. Let me be honest. He didn't probably smuggle artifacts. He should have did. There's an image of his wife wearing beautiful jewels from the Greek Hellenistic era, and they found it, and that, any which way, I'm getting pissed off just thinking about it. He's banned from Turkey, I guess he's dead now. He definitely lied in his diaries, but the core discovery does hold up. Because in one of the layers that he blew up, the one archaeologists call Troy VIIa, they found something chilling. A destruction layer. Fire damage across the city, arrowheads in the streets, unburied bodies, a city that didn't decline, a city that died violently somewhere around 1180 BC, right at the traditional date of the Trojan War. So that means the war might be real, which means the men who sailed home from it might also be real. And that brings us to the strangest homecoming story ever told, and the first open question of this video: if Troy was real, was Ithaca? And the answer is weirder than yes or no. But before we chase Odysseus, we have to deal with the man telling the story. Who was Homer? And here's the uncomfortable truth: we don't have any idea. We don't know where he lived, we don't know where he was born. Several different ancient cities claim him, which tells you how little anyone actually knew. We don't know for certain that he was even a single person. The ancients said that he was blind, maybe. That might just be legend that grew out of a blind bard character inside the Odyssey, a poet writing himself into his own story, or later audience assuming he did. What we can say is this: the Odyssey wasn't written the way books are written today. It was sung for centuries. Probably 400 or 500 years before anyone wrote a word of it down. The story lived entirely in human memory, performed by professional bards, passed mouth to ear generation after generation. There was actually competitions that cities would have on reciting the Iliad and the Odyssey, and whoever did it best would win. In the 1930s, a scholar named Milman Parry proved how that was even possible. He traveled to the Balkans and recorded illiterate folk singers who could perform epic poems tens of hundreds of lines long, from memory. Their secret was formula: repeated phrases, stock definitions, building blocks a singer could snap together live in real time. And when Parry looked at Homer, swift-footed Achilles, rosy-fingered dawn, wine dark sea, over and over, he found the exact same fingerprints. The Odyssey is an oral poem, which means Homer might be less of an author and more like the final voice in a chain of hundreds of voices stretching back centuries. Stretching back toward the actual Bronze Age, towards living memory of the world the poem describes. The story wasn't necessarily invented, it was inherited. So the question becomes, how much real information survived the trip? Scylla and Charybdis, a six-headed monster on one side, a ship-swallowing whirlpool on the other, guiding a narrow strait. Since antiquity, readers have identified that as the Strait of Messina, the channel between Sicily and Italy. And Messina really does have a dangerous current and whirlpools. Small ancient ships genuinely feared it. Hug one shore too close, you hit rocks. Drift to the other, and the current will take you. A sailor's real nightmare upgraded into a monster. The land of the lotus eaters, where sailors taste local plants and lose all desire to go home, ancient writers placed that on the coast of North Africa, often the island of Jerba, a real place at sailing distance where crews on long voyages might genuinely have stopped wanting to leave. The Cyclops, one school of thought, points at Sicily's volcanic landscape. And there's an even stranger theory: ancient Greeks digging around the Mediterranean would occasionally find the skulls of an extinct dwarf elephant. And a dwarf elephant skull has a giant hole in the middle of its face, the nasal cavity for their trunk. To someone who's never seen an elephant before, that skull kind of looks like one giant eye. Now I want to be careful here, because plenty of scholars will tell you the geography of the Odyssey is deliberately unmappable. That once Odysseus leaves the known world, he's in a fairy tale space, and pinning monsters to coordinates misses the point, and that's a fair position. But even the skeptics have to admit something important: the poem is soaked in real sailors' knowledge. Real winds, real hazards, real navigation by stars. Whoever built this story knew the Mediterranean the way a trucker knows a highway. And nowhere is that tension between fantasy and frighteningly specific details sharper than in the destination itself, Ithaca. Here's the problem. There is a Greek island called Ithaca today. Ithaca. Tourists visit it and there's a statue of Odysseus on it. It doesn't really match the poem. Homer describes Odysseus' Ithaca as low-lying and furthest out to sea toward the dusk, the westernmost island in its group. Modern Ithaca is mountainous and is not the westernmost island. It sits tucked between the larger island of Kephallonia. For centuries, scholars just shrugged. Homer never went there, poets exaggerate, whatever. Then in the 2000s, a British researcher named Robert Bittlestone proposed something audacious. What if ancient Ithaca wasn't Ithaca at all, but Palikkai, the western peninsula of Kephallonia? His theory, Palikkai was once a separate island, low-lying and westernmost, exactly as Homer describes, and the narrow sea channel separating it was filled over centuries by earthquakes and massive landslides. Kephallonia sits on one of the most seismically violent zones in Europe. Geologists took that idea seriously enough to go test it. The jury is still out on that, but here's where it gets even better. Back on modern Ithaca, at a site called Agios Athanasios, Greek archaeologists excavated the remains of a large Mycenaean-era complex. The right period, the right scale, with terrace structures, a spring, and pottery from the exact centuries where Odysseus would have lived. In 2010, the excavation team made headlines by suggesting it could be the palace of Odysseus himself. Now, plenty of archaeologists have pushed back hard on that claim, and you should hear it with the skepticism it deserves. No Bronze Age name tag, no smoking gun proving a king named Odysseus ever walked those stores, but in 2025 the story took a turn. Researchers went back to the site, and their new interpretation is that this place became a sanctuary, a cult center. Among the finds, an inscription carrying Odysseus' own name, meaning that ancient Greeks, people living on this island centuries closer to the Bronze Age than we'll ever be, came to this exact hill to worship him. Whatever this place was in 1200 BC, the people of Ithaca decided it belonged to Odysseus. They didn't treat him like a fairy tale, they treated him like an ancestor. And stop and appreciate what's not in dispute. There was a real Mycenaean settlement on Ithaca. Real Bronze Age chieftains ruled these islands. Someone sat on top of the hierarchy in 1200 BC. Someone with a hall and lands and a household that waited for him when he sailed eastward. The poem remembers a world, and the dirt keeps agreeing that this world existed, which brings us back to where it started, the sun going out. Book 20. Odysseus is home, disguised as a beggar, 1 day away from slaughtering the suitors who've occupied his house. And a seer named Theoclymenus has a vision. He looks at the doomed men laughing at their feast, and he tells them their faces are shrouded in night. Blood is on the walls, there are ghosts in the courtyard. And then that line, the sun perishing out of heaven, an evil mist spreading over everything. Even ancient readers wondered about that. Writers in antiquity, including Plutarch, floated the idea that the poet was describing a real solar eclipse. Fast forward to 2008, 2 researchers, Constantino Bicuzis and Marcello Magnesio, decided to actually test it. Because eclipses aren't vague. Astronomy runs backwards with perfect precision. If a total eclipse was visible from the Ionian Islands in the right era, we can name the day. Because there was one. April 16th, 1178 BC. But here's what makes that study genuinely unsettling. They didn't stop at the eclipse. The Odyssey is full of throwaway astronomical details. A new moon on the day of the slaughter, which checks out, because total eclipses can only happen at a new moon. Venus, visible high in the sky days earlier. The constellations Homer mentions for navigation. The researchers treated all of it as data, ran the sky backwards over decades of possibilities, and found the poem's internal celestial references lining up with the days surrounding April 16th, 1178, roughly a decade after Troy VIIa burned. 10 years of wondering, just like the story says. Now, is it proof? No, not necessarily. The authors themselves call it a hypothesis. Skeptics point out that eclipse readings of that passage are a stretch, that the data points require generous interpretation, which is all relatively fair. But I want you to sit with the alternative for a second. If it's a coincidence, it's a spectacular one, and if it's not, then somewhere in that chain of singers stretching back across 5 centuries of firelight, someone preserved the memory of a real afternoon when the sun died over Ithaca, on the day a king came home. So what's the truth behind the Odyssey? Here's my honest read. It's not a news report. Odysseus as written is a character. The monsters are monsters. But the poem is a memory. Because right around 1200 BC, the entire world the Odyssey describes collapsed. Historians call it the late Bronze Age collapse. Within a couple of generations, nearly every great civilization on the eastern Mediterranean fell apart. Cities were burned, trade died, and writing itself was forgotten in Greece for centuries. The people who came after lived in ruins of someone else's golden age. They walked past cyclopean walls they could no longer build, and told stories about giants who must have made them. And that's what the Odyssey really is. It's the sound of a civilization refusing to forget itself, a war that probably happened, islands that definitely exist, and kings whose halls are still in the ground. And maybe, just maybe, one impossible afternoon, when the sky got dark at the exact right moment, and the story never let go of it. Urban legends aren't a modern invention. The Odyssey might just be the oldest one that ever worked. A story passed voice to voice for so long that the line between what happened and what was told dissolved. And we just happen to be the first generation with the tools to actually check it out. Now, if stories that outlive their own facts are your thing, that's basically what this channel is. We have a lot more on screen right now. I'd really recommend seeing the St. George and the Dragon video. That one's awesome. It's such an interesting thing and story and how that evolved. I really enjoyed making that one. We also have the urban legend iceberg. That's going to be on screen right now. Those videos are so fun because we get into a lot of the American urban legends and seeing how they develop throughout the American culture and American mythos. I just want to take a moment as well to say thank you so much, everyone. Your likes, your comments, your subscriptions, I mean, they're helping the channel grow so much, and y'all are really just making this so much more fun to do. It's a lot more fun talking about silly things like this when you have an audience saying awesome stuff and giving praises and then their own thoughts and feelings. So feel free to like, comment, and subscribe on this video as well. It does help the channel. I do really appreciate it. I also want to go ahead and take a moment to advertise the channel membership that just launched on this channel. It's something I'm really excited about. It should help me connect with y'all further and then y'all with me conversely. It's also going to give me the opportunity to invest a little bit more into the channel. I don't know if y'all know, this microphone is not the greatest in the world, as well as having a few opportunities to get some licensed footage and get some stuff done so we can make these videos come out faster and be even higher quality than they are right now. Joining the channel membership, or the Soapbox Society, that's off the dome, by the way, I just thought about that. That's a great name. Anyways, by joining that, you'll also have the access to some exclusive features. You'll get previews on videos at the higher tiers, as well as opportunity to participate in new polls that will dictate what we cover next on this channel. So I'm really excited about it. Consider it if you want. It'd be really helpful for the channel and help this channel grow to new heights. So I'd really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a absolutely blessed day. And I will see you all in the next one.